This might be the best waiver wire week for the running back position that I've seen all year. And it comes at the perfect time because the bye weeks are starting. So in this video, we are breaking down 7 running backs that you need to be adding off your waiver wire in fantasy right now. And we're going to start with a rookie that's been in this video a couple of times this year, and it's Bucky Irving. And before you all get in the comments and say, Bucky Irving's not available in my league, don't worry. We will get to guys available in your league because we have some guys on this list who are available in over 95% of leagues. Now, the reason why Bucky Irving is interesting is this started earlier in the week. His own head coach, Todd Bowles, came out and said Bucky has earned more snaps moving forward. And this makes sense because so far this season, Rachaad White has been highly inefficient, and that's even dating back to last season. Now, it should be pointed out that entering this game, Rachaad White was dealing with an illness, and that might not sound like a lot compared to an injury, but it did pop up on Saturday. This was an illness that popped up on Saturday. He played through it. So if it popped up on Saturday and he played the next day, he probably was still either dealing with that illness or the residual effects. And if you've ever been sick, you know it's hard to do anything, let alone play a football game at the highest level. So I do want to cut him some slack for any performances that we will talk about in week 4 for him, but you can see right here, my friend Mason Dodd, after last week, Rachaad White through 3 games, 31 carries, 66 yards, averaging literally 2 yards per carry. Bucky Irving, 24 carries, 145 yards. This guy's averaging 5 yards per carry. This is why Todd Bowles said Bucky is going to see more work. And according to NFL Pro, Bucky Irving ranks 10th in EPA per rush this year compared to Rachaad White, who ranks 42nd out of 49 running backs. And now, what is EPA per rush? It's just your efficiency, how good you are. Now, if we look at the usage according to PFF in week 4, you can see here, Bucky did start to earn more usage. He plays 32 snaps to Rachaad White's 45. This Bucky Irving usage of him playing 41% of the snaps is what that equates out to, is the best we've seen all year. And if you scroll over here, this last column is the carries in the game. 10 for Rachaad White. Again, he was dealing with that illness. This could be factored in. We don't know for sure. But also 10 for Bucky Irving. So a 50-50 backfield split. And Irving ended up taking this for a nice day overall. 12.5 fantasy points in a split backfield. He turns 11 touches into 55 total yards here between 49 rushing, 6 receiving. Whoa, 6 receiving. That's 5 yards per touch, and he finds the end zone, a serviceable flex option for you, not only in week 4, but I do believe moving forward he'll be a nice flex option for you because the bye weeks start this week in week 5, and there's even more running back injuries that we're going to get into in this video that he could replace. So now we're in a situation where the Bucs offense has looked great in 3 out of 4 games. Their offensive line was improved this offseason and is looking good, and you're getting a young rookie behind there. There's a lot to like. Now, if you're not familiar with Bucky Irving, let me just catch you up to speed real quick. This is a guy, if we scroll to what he was able to do during his time in college, he spent his last 2 seasons, and I believe he ended up spending his first season at Minnesota, but his last 2 seasons here, he ends up going over 1,000 rushing yards each year. According to Pro Football Focus, he was their highest graded rusher across the 2022 and 2023 seasons. And if you scroll over to this piece right here, the receptions was the big thing for him. He ends up catching 31 balls and 53. That's as good as it gets in college for a running back. Earns a 13% target share, or nearly. Now, the offense in Oregon played into this checkdowns from Bo Nix, but this is a young running back who came out of college after just 3 seasons, and he got drafted in the 4th round by the Bucs, who seem to really like him. Now, the biggest concern for Bucky Irving, and my concern, was that he's a little bit undersized, 192 pounds, and not only 192 pounds, had pass protection problems, which is not great when you're entering the NFL, and only ran a 4.55, which would blow me out of the water, and really anybody I know, but a 4.55 for 192 back compared to NFL running backs is really bad. You can see down here his speed score. So he's not really all that athletic. He's a smaller guy, athletic compared to NFL running backs. Again, he would blow me out of the water. He's a smaller guy and doesn't pass protect, but that does not seem to be an issue so far into his season for Bucky Irving. And because of that, he's a priority add before the bye weeks start to take place in week 5. Go pick him up. He's available in over 50% of leagues still. Now, this next guy, here's your deeper leagues. Here's all the people who said Bucky Irving's not available in my league. Well, Trey Sermon most definitely is, because he's currently available in over 99% of Yahoo leagues. And here's the reason why he's an interesting add this week. Jonathan Taylor, Colts running back, has an ankle injury. Questionable to return to the game. He got it taped up on the sideline, but it's Trey Sermon in at running back. That was the end of the game. That was literally like the last drive of the game for the Colts. Jonathan Taylor, after a big day of 100 total yards, a touchdown, looking great, one of the good running backs we have in fantasy, he's taken from us. He's freaking taken from us. And then immediately I start to see the worst case scenario because I have a lot of Jonathan Taylor this year. Got him at the end of the 1st round in many leagues, early 2nd. Jonathan Taylor, late game right ankle. We start to see first fits a potential, as Jeff Mueller says here on Twitter, for a high ankle mechanism. Now, that's not great. It later came out, according to Underdog, that he ended up having a mild high ankle sprain, which just can maybe lead you to missing a game at least. And as my friend Sports MD Analysis on Twitter points out here, he kind of just backs that up. He says, Jonathan Taylor, video suggests high ankle. Now we have that news that it is a mild high ankle, so check for Sports DM Analysis for getting that right. That's why he went to Harvard and I didn't. But most RBs would miss at least 1 week. Severity is to be dated, so to be determined. So severity doesn't seem too bad right now, but again, they have to do some more tests. Jonathan Taylor expect at least one game, potentially more miss, which is why Trey Sermon is interesting. And so far on the season, Trey Sermon is the only other running back. Entering week 4, he had 4 carries. Tyler Goodson had 0. And then in week 4, Trey Sermon picked up 5 more carries. So he's the only other running back on this Colts team to earn a single touch in the backfield, not named Jonathan Taylor this season. I think that matters when we could assume he'll slot into a full-time workload until Jonathan Taylor returns. Now, a little bit of a background on Sermon. He was an Ohio State running back who had kind of this injuries in college, never a full workload. He was a guy that we didn't really know what to think of coming to the NFL. The 49ers got him, and he got a little bit overblown in fantasy, but he has nice size at 215 pounds. He's a solid athlete. And again, the start to his career going to the 49ers, getting beat out by a later round rookie that year, never really making a name for himself. That's a reason why he kind of got moved on to a different team. The 49ers just had the horses at that point, and then obviously they go and they trade for Christian McCaffrey a couple of years back. So Trey Sermon just kind of bounced around some rosters. He was injured in the preseason and training camp a little bit, so he didn't get to make a name for himself. And of course, Jonathan Taylor is there. But now he looks like the next man up, and he has the size behind a good offensive line to potentially see 15 plus touches a game for the Colts, and he has a good matchup against the Jaguars next week. So Trey Sermon, especially for those Jonathan Taylor managers, is going to be somebody who, during the bye weeks, is a crucial ad off the waivers, one of the better running back ads of the week. And if you want to see exactly like where he ranks compared to all the other guys, well, I have a tool for you. And that tool is my waiver wire rankings and tiers that I update every single week. This is from last week. You can see right here, I rank players by tiers, meaning this is the tier that I would rank them in terms of your fab budget spending. Every single position, we have the tight ends. We also have a drops list as well, so you know who you should be dropping to pick up these types of players. And I rank like 20 guys at the running back and wide receiver, over 20 guys, as you can see right here. So this is last week's, and this is a tool and just one of the many tools that you can get in my fantasy blueprint, but nearly 20,000 other people have access to right now. And it's pretty easy to get. How do you get access? You see right here, you just follow these 2 simple steps. They'll be linked down below on a website, but the most important thing is you'll sign up through one of our partners, like Underdog is one of our partners right here, because when you sign up through a partner, you get my blueprint this year, and 20,000 other people have, risk-free through one of the 2 partners. Now, what does this mean, Sal? What does risk-free mean? It's simple. It's a one-time payment of $10, but if you don't make your fantasy playoffs for whatever reason, it might not even be the blueprint's fault. Most of the time it's not. There's a lot of injuries in fantasy, right? Well, I'll just refund you 100% if you do not make your fantasy playoffs of that $10 when you sign up through one of our partners. So to get access to my fantasy blueprint that I use for all my leagues and 20,000 other people use for theirs, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen right now or click the link in the description below to get access to this limited time risk-free offer. Now, the next situation and player I want to talk about is Tank Bigsby, and more importantly, what's happening right now in the Jacksonville Jaguars backfield. Because Bigsby, for the second time this season, and he's only been healthy for 2 games, so both times he's been healthy, took on a larger workload. Now, it should be noted that Travis Etienne did deal with a shoulder injury in the first quarter of this game. He was questionable to return, but he only really missed like a drive, so it didn't impact all that much what we're about to see, but that should be pointed out because maybe Etienne was a little bit more hampered than we were led on to believe when he came back into this game, which is possible. Now, in week 4, Bigsby had a good role, and we'll get to that, but it's important to preface this with in week 1, he saw 34% of the snaps and 50% of the rush attempts. And in that game in week 1, Bigsby went out there and had 12 carries, the same amount as Travis Etienne, for 73 yards, which was 30 more yards than Travis Etienne. So he's much more efficient. And this was important because all offseason, Doug Peterson, the Jaguars coaches, said Tank Bigsby is going to have a larger role this year. And then we saw it in week 1. That's alarms, concerns for Travis Etienne. Well, the problem from there, after he was a popular week 1 waiver wire ad and was featured in this version of the video in week 1, well, Tank Bigsby had a shoulder injury. He was questionable to return to the game in week 2, and then he ends up missing week 3, or he ends up playing in week 3 last second. He misses the rest of week 2. Week 3, he returns, though, only plays 10% of the snaps, only sees 13% of the rush attempts. I didn't really hear anybody talking about this much, but it was pretty clear and obvious that it was a shoulder injury that he was limited from, and that's why he didn't see a bigger role. And that's very obvious right now because in week 4, you can see Tank Bigsby right here, plays 17 snaps to 30 for Travis Etienne. Okay, we still know that Etienne's playing the majority of the snaps, but again, he sees 7 carries to Etienne's 11. So he starts to see a larger amount of the carries in this game. Specifically in this game, he goes out there, plays 29% of the snaps, sees over 40% of the back, or about 40% of the backfield carries, and that's important to call out because, well, he's still menacing around and taking a lot of touches away from Travis Etienne like his coaches said he would this offseason. And it's also important because Bigsby outproduced Etienne. You can see right here, Etienne had a good game, 12 total touches for 60 yards in this game, but the problem is, well, you had Tank Bigsby going out there and averaging 13 yards per touch. On his 7 carries, he had a 50-plus yard run, something we haven't seen out of Etienne this year. He's going for 80 total yards, Mr. Tank Bigsby, and he's looking great. Now, as the snap shares suggest, this is still Travis Etienne's backfield, but this is a Jaguars team and a coaching staff and Doug Peterson that might be on the hot seat, and it's just time to play your best players and try to save your job, and maybe that's what we're getting out of Tank Bigsby, who has been performing as a better player. Now, the one concern I will point out is this man right here Dearness Johnson, who's been on the team now since last year. He comes over from the Browns a few years back, and he did see 12 snaps in this game. But more than half of these snaps were in the first quarter when Etienne went out for a little while with that shoulder injury. It only led to 2 carries, so I'm not super concerned with this usage. He only saw like 5 second half snaps in the entire game for Dearness Johnson, so that shouldn't be a concern. Maybe Bigsby himself is also not 100% back from the injury, so I wouldn't read too much into that yet. Now, entering the bye weeks, it's a nice matchup against the Colts, who have basically been run on more than half of the weeks this season, and you can acquire a lot of yards per touch. They're bottom 10 in yards per touch allowed, or yards per play allowed in the running game, so that's a nice matchup. Matchup against the Bears is tough. Patriots you can run on, Packers you can run on, Eagles you can run on. So really, 4 out of the next 5 games, if Tank Bigsby continues to see his role stay the same or increase, he can be a flex option, especially in deeper leagues for you. Now, the next man I want to talk about, we're talking about deeper leagues, 99% of leagues this guy is available in, and it's Audric Estime, because right now the Broncos backfield has been pretty terrible. I mean, entering week 4, Denver ranked bottom 10 in overall rushing efficiency. And if I'm being honest with you, a lot of that is being propped up by their mobile quarterback Bo Nix and Tyler Beatty, who last week ended up having 7 carries for 70 yards in garbage time. Through the first 4 weeks of the season, these guys, Javonte Williams the starter and Jaleel McLaughlin, who delivers a lot of hype around, have not been good through the first 3 weeks, I should say, because entering week 4, to be fair to them, they played better. But as you can see right here, Jaleel McLaughlin, the guy who's supposed to be extremely efficient per touch, just 2 yards per touch through his first 3 games. We can pull up Javonte Williams' numbers, just 2.2 yards per carry through his first 3 games. I mean, this is as bad as it gets. And as I mentioned earlier, Tyler Beatty had a nice week in garbage time, but he ends up injuring his back. He collapsed on the sideline and had to get stretchered out. He did not return, so we don't know his status. So right now, this backfield just looks pretty bad. And to add one more thing about Javonte Williams, through the first 3 weeks of the season, he ranked 45th out of 49 running backs, according to NFL Pro, in efficiency. Brutal. Now, we do have to throw these guys some bail, because Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin had good games in week 4. But I will say, the first half and the first half of the third quarter were not good for Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin. It was a lot of the same. But they had a couple of big plays in the second half and really the third and fourth quarter. Javonte Williams ends up with 77 yards, averaging nearly 5 yards per touch. McLaughlin just 9 carries, but gets 5.1 yards per touch. So this was nice to see. Finally, we got some nice usage late in the game against the Jets defensive line that has been weaker this year against the run, and definitely wore down late in that game. In terms of the passing game, not much from either of them. McLaughlin just has 1 catch for 0 yards. Javonte 2 catches for 3 yards. So overall, this was the first good game that these guys put up basically in the first 4 weeks of the season. And even then, you're looking at a situation where you're getting like 8 to 9 to maybe 10 fantasy points, which is why I am calling out the 5th round rookie out of Notre Dame, Audric Estime, as a potential add, especially in deeper leagues, because this might seem crazy to you right now. Oh, Javonte just had a good game. Jaleel McLaughlin's there. In general, the Broncos offense stinks. Bo Nix only threw for 60 passing yards. I know all of that. But this team clearly wants to run the ball, and a interesting guy at 220 pounds who had a solid college career, and we'll talk about that in a second, is worth adding in fantasy, especially in a season where everybody's going down with injuries, and anybody getting 15 carries in your lineup is worthwhile, which I think can happen at some point this season for Audric Estime, who last year at Notre Dame, I was going to say Ohio State, so many running backs they produce, at Notre Dame has over 1,300 rushing yards. With his receiving yards of 142, the dude goes for nearly 1,500 total yards, 18 touchdowns, and here's the thing. Estime is known for his power and ability to produce yards after contact, which is really not something that the Denver backs have been doing this year. And on his 210 carries last season, he was very reliable. He only had 1 fumble, and you could argue that fumble wasn't even his fault, more so just a great defensive play, so I guess it is his fault. But 210 rush attempts, just 1 fumble. This is a guy who was reliable in college. And look, this is the thing. His head coach right now, Sean Payton of the Denver Broncos, he's going to give guys opportunities in the backfield. We saw it with Jaleel McLaughlin last year, as long as he likes them. And he hyped up Audric Estime this offseason. I mean, heck, he's the reason why they drafted him in the 5th round. So I'd be looking to pick up Estime, who the only reason why you haven't heard his name right now is because he's on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform, but he is expected to return this week for week 5. There's been no reported setbacks as of my recording. He's expected to be back on the active roster for week 5, and if that's the case, he could see touches right away. And speaking of another guy in a similar situation, it's Kendre Miller, the Saints' second-year player, their 3rd round pick out of TCU last year. I think he's an interesting name and somebody you should be stashing because, like an Audric Estime, he's been on the PUP list to start this year with an injury. He was injured for most of camp with a hamstring. It's been kind of the name of his game throughout his NFL career, is injuries. But as you can see here, the latest update we have is that Kendre Miller, his hamstring, he's hoping to practice this week. Now, hoping to practice and actually practicing are 2 different things, so we'll see what that ends up looking like, and I'm not going to be the guy who sits here and tries to paint you a different picture. This guy's not reliable. He has been injured, but let's see if we can get him actually out there. And just to show you exactly those injuries, I mean, just brutal. Last year, the hamstring injury. The hamstring injury is the worst thing you could be dealing with. I'm currently dealing with a recurring hamstring injury right now. It sucks. Then he has a shoulder injury, then an ankle injury, so everything hit him. Then he had a hamstring injury this preseason, which has kept him out all preseason, and so far the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. So again, not a reliable player that you can just say, yeah, he's going to go out out there and definitely not get hurt. No, I'm not going to try and tell you that. But I will let you know at least that this guy was a talented player. His final year at TCU, he had a full workload, 224 carries, basically 1,400 rushing yards. You add in a couple of receiving yards. He's going for nearly 1,500 total yards at TCU, and then he enters the NFL early. The dude entered the NFL at just 20 years old. That's usually a good sign that the NFL is telling you, hey, you're good enough, come on out to the league. This is a 215-pound back, reportedly now closer to 220 pounds, who can break tackles. He has power. He's kind of like an Audric Estimé, who we talked about, and in his small sample in his rookie season last year with the Saints, he did average 5.4 yards per touch, which is impressive. Now, Miller is interesting because, look, I'm not going to say, oh my God, Kendre Miller, but he's going to start taking touches away from Alvin Kamara. I don't think that's the case, but Jamal Williams has done nothing. Jamal Williams does not look good. He's a 30-plus-year-old running back who looks, I don't want to say out of shape, but a little bit bigger than usual, and this is a guy that hasn't done anything behind Alvin Kamara, and the reason why I bring up Kendre Miller is because he is a younger back who does have power, size, and got hyped up this offseason, and in this Clint Kubiak system, the new offensive coordinator there, he could be a good fit with the outside zone running scheme. It also helps that Taysom Hill got an ab injury this past week, and he's not going to return, or didn't return to the game, and we really don't know the update on his status, if it's a core muscle injury, if it requires core muscle surgery. This could be a multi-week to multi-month thing. We'll have to see when we get more news, but this is a guy who was seeing some carries this past week, so if Taysom Hill is not out there either, it makes it easier for Kendre Miller when he returns, which could be as soon as this upcoming week, to start to see touches. And now here's the deal. This is the workload for Alvin Kamara entering week 4. I mean, over 20 carries per game, nearly 4 targets per game. You're seeing 25 opportunities per game for one Alvin Kamara. So this is a guy who's been getting a lot of touches. And honestly, for a nearly 30-year-old running back, that's not great. Like, it's great for fantasy, but I can't imagine he's going to see 25 opportunities a game and stay healthy all year. In fact, he's already not healthy. He dealt with a rib and hip injury so far this week. He didn't practice on Wednesday. He was limited Thursday and Friday. He ended up playing, and it wasn't really an issue because Kamara played 61 of a possible 74 snaps, which in that game ended up equating to somewhere around, I think, 75 to 80%. It was 82% of the snaps, and it led to a massive game. We'll pull it up right here. Another massive game for him. 24 fantasy points, depending on the platform you're playing on. He gets 26 touches, 7 catches, 19 carries, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. It was just rinse and repeat for Alvin Kamara. I'm not going to say anything that Kendre Miller is going to take his job away. I'm just saying Alvin Kamara seeing 25, 26 touches starts to get sketchy in week 7, 8, 9, 10 in terms of injury. So one piece of this is potentially Kamara missing time, even if it's just a game or two at some point this year. And the other piece is Clint Kubiak, who has this Saints offense now in 3 out of 4 games looking really good. And also I think that you can probably see a situation like we're seeing right now with the Jets and maybe a Braylon Allen and Breece Hall, where 2 running backs are out there, maybe even the Packers some weeks with Emanuel Wilson and Josh Jacobs. There's 2 running backs out there seeing usable weeks in fantasy because the system is that good. So I think right now is a good time to stash Miller before he potentially returns in week 5, because at the very least, I think he'll immediately become the RB2 on this team. And again, he has not stayed healthy. We have to actually see that happen, but he is a talented player when healthy and what looks like a really good system and offense for him. And speaking of a talented player, let's get to this next third-year running back who's just been consistent, and he finally had a strong fantasy day. Or I should say a solid fantasy day, and that's Tyler Allgeier of the Falcons, who reminded us why he's one of the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy this past week after Allgeier went out there. He put up 10 fantasy points, you know, not the craziest thing, but he sees 10 total touches. He totals 60 rushing, 20 receiving, so 8 yards per touch, 10 touches for 80 yards. He outproduces Bijan Robinson in this game on the ground and both in the, or overall and on the ground. Bijan continued struggling on the ground, just 7 carries for 28 yards in this game. Now, Bijan's role is strong, but Allgeier reminded us why he's one of the most interesting players in fantasy, because he has standalone value to get these 10 fantasy point weeks like he just did. But if something was to happen to Bijan, we know Allgeier can produce as a workhorse back, because we literally saw it out of him as a rookie, where he saw 210 carries, set the record for the Falcons rookie rushing record with over 1,000. And even last year with Bijan Robinson there in their first year together, you end up seeing Tyler Allgeier still see nearly 11 carries per game, over a target per game. Now I know this is a totally different system with Arthur Smith, but now we're seeing it as well this year that there's still some Tyler Allgeier involved. But we should point out Bijan did enter this game with a little bit of a shoulder injury that he picked up, I believe, in Friday's practice, so that probably factored in. And according to PFF, Bijan, he did play fewer snaps than usual, just 36 of the possible 56 snaps. This is a guy who was leading the NFL by playing like 75 to 80% of his team snaps every single week, and now you're seeing a situation where these 36 snaps is about 60 to 65%. You scroll over to the backfield carries, Allgeier sees more carries, 8 carries compared to 7 for Bijan. So Allgeier, for the first time this year, his highest backfield percentage, 53% of the backfield carries. Again, maybe it's a shoulder, because if you actually watch this game, Bijan looks fine. It's not like he looks dusty or anything. He's a second-year player who has a lot of bursts and looked great as a rookie. So the point is not that Allgeier is now going to make this a 50-50 backfield. The point is just to remind you that Allgeier, who's available in over 80% of fantasy leagues right now, can be a flex option for you in the bye weeks. And also, if Bijan was to ever miss time, he immediately becomes, in my opinion, a top 12 running back. And the knock on him in the NFL has been the guy doesn't catch passes. The guy can catch passes. His final year in college at BYU had a 10% target share. Anything above 7% in college for running backs is great. Translated to 28 receptions. Anything above 20 for a running back in in college is great. The reason why he hasn't looked good in the NFL catching passes is because he hasn't been asked to do so by his former coach the last 2 years in Arthur Smith. So Allgeier is an ad, and so is Emanuel Wilson for similar reasons, but maybe Emanuel Wilson's role is even better. A player profiler has to get a photo for this guy. He's available in 86% of leagues, but based on the season he's having so far, get the guy a photo. Come on, people over there. But let's see here. You can see Emanuel Wilson last week, we saw it for the first time. He got a big role, 42% of the snaps, 35% of the backfield carries. He translated this into a solid fantasy day. We talked about it last week. He was an ad for us last week. I spent in one league like $10 to $13 on him to make sure I got him in a deeper league. 16.5 fantasy points. He goes between his rushing and receiving for 85 yards, finds the end zone, and that was important because he ended up outproducing his teammate, Josh Jacobs, who had just 5.8 fantasy points, who had just 48 total yards on 15 touches. This was a near 50-50 split in terms of backfield touches in week 3. Would it continue into week 4 in a tough matchup against the Vikings was something we needed to see, but Wilson clearly had carved out a role based on last week. And it's important to point out because A.J. Dillon is done for the year. Marshawn Lloyd is somebody who's probably not even going to jump Wilson once he's back because Wilson has been so good, and Lloyd has only been injured and fumbling in preseason and camp so far. And Wilson at this point, it's important to point out that now he's been a guy since the beginning of last year that this team has liked. They've hyped up. We'll talk about Matt LaFleur hyping up Wilson as recent as this past week. And Matt LaFleur loves to use multiple running backs. He has his entire time dating back to Tennessee with the Packers, Aaron Jones, and A.J. Dillon. And now it looks like it could be happening again. It's not positive, but it could be. Because in this game, we're still seeing a split. Jacobs plays the most snaps, and that's what you would expect. 46 of 76 snaps here, you can see according to PFF. But Emanuel Wilson, 30 snaps. That means he played 40% of the snaps. You scroll over to the backfield carries. It's 8 carries for Wilson, 9 for Jacobs. 47 of the backfield carries, so nearly a split backfield on the ground. Now, the good thing for Jacobs owners is he gets all 5 targets compared to 0 for Emanuel Wilson, but this is a concern, the split backfield on the ground. Now, Wilson really didn't do anything in terms of production this week. It was a tough matchup against the Vikings where the Packers got down by 3 or 4 scores, like Cam Akers last week in a similar situation. It was just a dusty week for Wilson. But Wilson still ranks, even after a poor week 4 showing, top 15 this year in running back yards per touch. He's been efficient. He's a big back at 226 pounds, so if anything was to happen to Josh Jacobs, you could immediately see Wilson also take the red zone work, the goal line work, the short down work. He's seen some of that usage already so far this season. And like I mentioned earlier, no matter what, even when Marshawn Lloyd returns in 2 or 3 plus weeks from the IR list, the PUP, I think he's on short-term IR. I don't think Marshawn Lloyd is going to be a factor in this offense. I think he's going to be the clear running back 3. We've even seen Christopher Brooks in some blowout situations against the Titans get in at times. Wouldn't be shocked if Lloyd is behind him to start just to kind of prove a point that you have to stay healthy and earn your role here. So Wilson, just like he was last week, he's kind of one of these ads like a Tyler Allgeier, although I prefer Wilson because I think he'll see a higher touch count each week, not dealing with a dominant Bijan Robinson type force in terms of snaps. But Wilson is one of these guys who has standalone value for the bye weeks with a lot of upside. And as recent as a few days ago, Matt LaFleur was hyping up Wilson. We've always said it from day one. The guy's got everything in his body to be really good at running back in the league, and basically Matt LaFleur goes on to say, like, I won't be the guy that keeps him from not seeing his full potential, so I'm going to see him touch or give him touches. I'm going to give him work, and we've now seen that in the back-to-back weeks. All right, now this next guy is going to be a priority ad this week, but should he be? But before we get there, 67% of you are not subscribed to this channel. We made it to the part of the video where it's the gentleman's agreement. We shake on it through the video. If you made it this far, it means you're finding it helpful, you find it interesting, maybe you find it entertaining for some reason, you think I'm funny, okay? Well, either way, gentleman's agreement. This is where you hit the subscribe button if you are one of those 67% who have not already. It allows us to keep putting out this content at a high and very quick level, which is difficult to do when you hit that subscribe button. So 2 seconds, gentleman's agreement, go ahead and do it. What are you waiting for? Now that guy who's going to be a priority ad this week, but should he be, is Kareem Hunt of the Kansas City Chiefs. Kareem Hunt, if we go over to this page right here, let's look at it. Kareem Hunt was active for the first time this season. I said, don't spend all your money on Carson Steele. Why are people spending 40 to 50% of their fab budget? Kareem Hunt leads the team in snaps, 28. Now this needs more context because Carson Steele, who sees just 11 snaps, fumbled early on in that game. He fumbled after just 2 carries, did not return, got benched. But that's going to happen. And that led to Kareem Hunt seeing 16 or 14 carries, 2 targets, 16 overall opportunities in this game, and he was solid on them. The dude turned 16 overall opportunities into 85 yards, averaged over 5 yards per touch, literally off the couch. So now we're in a situation where there's an undrafted rookie in Carson Steele, an injured Isaiah Pacheco, Samaje Perine, who basically Kareem Hunt played over. Kareem Hunt's been in this system. They now don't have Rashee Rice. They need to lean on the run game behind a solid offensive line even more. I think we're going to keep seeing Kareem Hunt featured in this offense for majority of the snaps, but the problem becomes you have those other guys there. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's eligible to return this week, and based on reports yesterday from Ian Rappaport, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is set to return from non-football illness. He was dealing with PTSD, so Edwards-Helaire is going to come back as well. He has some experience in this offense. They need a guy who can catch passes like him in this offense with Rashee Rice gone in the short areas of the field. So there's a chance it just gets really messy. So I wouldn't go overboard here. If he's available in your league, yeah, 10, 15% of your budget, especially if you're somebody who needs a win right now, I think that makes sense. But don't go overboard. Just like we saw a couple weeks ago with one Carson Steele, yeah, maybe you'll get a single game where you see 17 carries. And even in that game, you only got 8 fantasy points. And now it looks like he's just been one fumbled out of his entire fantasy season. Again, that could change, but this is just a patch job until Isaiah Pacheco comes back in 6 weeks. Can you patch it up with Samaje Perine, Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire? I think that's what the Chiefs are going to do. I think Kareem Hunt could be the red zone back, which means he is an ad right now, but he's not like go spend all your fab budget ad on Kareem Hunt, a 30-year-old running back. Next guy to talk about is Cordell Patterson, and this guy would actually be higher up on my list, but he got injured, but we have to talk about that more in a second because Cordell Patterson this past week was the best Steelers running back we've seen all season. Now, it did come in a game where Jaylen Warren was out with a knee injury, but Jaylen Warren didn't practice all week, and he got ruled out pretty early with that knee injury, I believe, on Friday. So here's the deal. He might miss some more time. This could be week to week. This could be a bigger thing. So if that's the case, we could see a Patterson roll, but the problem is, look at this. He only played 9 snaps this past week. Some people won't look enough into that. He played 9 snaps because he got hurt. He was well on his way to leading this backfield. He had 6 carries early on in this game, and he took these carries for a nice day because on just 6 carries, as you can see right here, 43 yards. So he's averaging 7 yards per carry. Has 2 catches as well for 19 yards. So this guy put up 8 total touches and ends up going out there and having 62 yards. The best and most efficient performance we've seen this year from a Pittsburgh Steelers running back. But the problem was Patterson was just carted off the field with an ankle injury. He had his right shoe off and he was taken back to the locker room. So again, carted off the field. We need more context. It doesn't mean that he was just couldn't walk. It's just easier to not put weight on an ankle injury if it's going to swell up or anything like that. But at this point, the competition isn't hard because entering week 4, Najee Harris was averaging just 3.7 yards per carry. He was seeing 20 touches a week. We know that this Pittsburgh Steelers team with Arthur Smith, who by the way, Arthur Smith brought Cordell Patterson with him over from this offseason. Atlanta went out and handpicked him, even though he already had Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris on the team. He handpicked Cordell Patterson. And right now, Cordell Patterson is looking like the best Steelers running back since Jaylen Warren is hurt. And Najee Harris is coming off of a game where he saw 13 carries for 19 yards. Now, Najee Harris also entered this game with an injury. He basically bailed out his fantasy day because he had 3 catches for 54 yards. One of those, I think, went for 34, if I'm not mistaken, yards. But overall, Najee Harris has not been good. Najee Harris was losing his job in the first half of this game to Cordell Patterson, who was playing more snaps, seeing more touches than him before Patterson got hurt. And yes, I know this is a 33-year-old running back, but he's a former receiver, mostly special teams player, has only been playing running back the last 4 years or so in kind of this hybrid role. Started with the Patriots 4 or 5 years ago, but it's been a hybrid role, never seeing a lot of carries per year. And he has this sort of favoritism like we mentioned with Arthur Smith. So assuming that Cordell Patterson is not having a high ankle injury, it's a low ankle and he only maybe misses a week or no time at all, then Patterson, as of this recording, I don't have that news, Patterson would then become more of a priority ad for me higher up on the list this week, and we'll update that in the waiver tiers over in the blueprint. Make sure you go get it, link down below. Next guy I want to talk about is sort of a quick hitter. It's Braylon Allen. He's still available in 50% of leagues. To me right now, he's the #1 handcuff running back in fantasy. That's definitely available, again, in a lot of leagues that he shouldn't be, over 50% of leagues. I think 52% right now. He's coming off of another week where he saw a good amount of touches, and Breece Hall managers are concerned. You can see Braylon Allen, 27 snaps to 51 for Breece Hall. Okay, yeah, Breece Hall sees the majority of the snaps, but Braylon Allen, 8 carries to just 10 for Breece Hall. And in this game, it wasn't like Braylon Allen was doing anything spectacular. We can pull up his performance right now. If we scroll all the way down to it, it's going to take a while to. That's how bad this was. You can scroll right here, and you can see 9 touches for 46 total yards. Overall, that's not terrible. Like, he's still averaging 5 yards per touch. He just didn't find the end zone, didn't have a lot of overall touches, but it's similar to what Breece Hall did. Breece Hall only had 10 touches for middling production as well. So I do think that Braylon Allen is a priority ad this week, one of the 5 most important running back ads that we have in our waiver wire tiers. Now, one running back I want to talk about is Jeremy McNichols of the Washington Commanders, because I want to say, don't add this guy. Don't go out there and add this guy, because you might look at his production, 8 carries for 68 yards, 2 touchdowns, puts up 20 fantasy points. His touchdown in the first half was nifty. He looked good overall, but most of his production, 5 or 6 touches in his second touchdown, came on the last drive in garbage time when the starters were pulled. It wasn't important, and Austin Eckler could be returning as soon as this week from a concussion. And another name to mention, like we kind of mentioned him earlier, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire returning this week. It's kind of that messy situation, so you might as well take stabs, especially in deeper leagues. On all these Chiefs running backs, I would put the priority right now as Kareem Hunt #1, #2 Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 3 Samaje Perine, and 4 Carson Steele. These have been the running backs that you need to add, and there's a lot of them. A lot just happened this week. I think this is the best week for running back waivers since probably week 1 when Dobbins and a couple other guys were out there, but these are guys you need to add right now. And when the wide receiver video is out on Tuesday, it might be already, it will pop up right here. I appreciate you all a ton. Gentlemen's agreement. Remember, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Go dominate your waiver wire. Not now, but right now.